Have you ever faced this issue of cost element not having a cost object and you're not able to post something? And the system is giving a message that this cost element requires an account assignment relevant to cost accounting. That means it is asking that this line item, which is posted on this GL account, should have any of these allowed cost objects. But we don't have an option to post or give the cost object directly at the time of posting the transaction. So this is an example in the Migo transaction where I am trying to post a goods receipt onto the finished goods, and I do not have a place where I can enter a cost object. But the system does not allow me to post without having a cost object. So how can we tackle this? This kind of situation is not identified only in Migo transaction, but there can be various transactions, especially on the FIMM and the FISD integrations, where the primary cost element is expected to have a certain cost object assigned to it. Depending upon the type of transaction, whether it is a material transaction coming from or whether it is a sale transaction or a purchase transaction, there are different cost objects that are expected by the system, which are to be assigned onto that cost element line item. But because usually these FIMM and FISD transactions happen in the background, we do not have an option to enter the cost object manually in this transaction. So what can we do in such transactions? How can we enter and where can we enter the cost object is what we are trying to understand in this video. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. And last time when I have asked for suggestions on topics, one of the interesting topics that I found is OKB9. OKB9 is a small concept, but it is relatively very important. Rather than just the configuration of how to use OKB9, it is very important to understand when and what cost object are we exactly supposed to assign in different scenarios using OKB9. And we also understand what are the limitations of OKB9, and I try to cover as much details as possible without boring you in this video. So before we go into the video, you all know that you can contribute to our work by joining the channel and becoming a super member or a premium member, and you also get member exclusive perks for each level. And if you want to do a one-time contribution, you can hit the thanks button below this video, and that will help us to cover our expenses like server expenses, trainer expenses, anything, the software expenses which we have. So please contribute to our work and let us jump into the video. So what is OKB9? OKB9 is a transaction where we assign default cost objects to cost elements. I repeat, only cost elements. You cannot assign a cost object here to a non-P&L account, non-cost elements like only non-operating cost elements. You cannot assign even to balance sheet accounts. It should be a primary cost element which is allowed for cost objects. For example, it can be your expense accounts, it can be your consumption accounts, it can be your revenue accounts, any primary cost element which is working or operating on the purchase side or on the sales side, or even for that matter, even if you want to use it only in your FI only transactions, even then you can use this OKB9 transaction code. Now, why do we need to use OKB9? Because we want a cost object to be assigned to our transactions. Now, what happens if we do not want a cost object to be assigned, or what happens if we don't have a cost object assigned to this transaction? Again, that is a big story, but in short, the purpose of assigning cost objects to any transaction code is to capture those costs or revenues, in short, the values from that transaction into the controlling module. And why do we do that? In controlling module, we use for reporting purposes. It can be management reporting or any kind of forecasting, etc. So in order to do this management reporting or the internal reporting, we need to transfer all our transactions like our costs, like expenses and revenues from FI to CO. So the bridge between FI and CO are the cost objects. So that is the reason we require to have a proper cost object assigned to our FI transactions. Now, the FI transaction might originate in FI or it might originate in other modules like SD, etc. Irrespective of where it is originating, once it comes to FI, we expect a cost object to be assigned to it so that these costs also flow into controlling. So that is the purpose of using OKB9 or assigning a cost object. Now, when should we use it? Typically, OKB9 should be used only when we cannot assign a cost object directly in the transaction code. For example, you are using a transaction code FB60. FB60 is used to post a vendor invoice, and in this transaction, you have an option to enter the required cost object, be it cost center, internal order, profitability segment, etc. You have an option to manually enter the cost object against the P&L line item. So do we need to use OKB9 in these scenarios? No. And what if I still use? The system will not stop. The system will simply ignore the cost object that is assigned in OKB9, which means whenever there is a possibility to enter manually, the manually entered cost object always takes a precedence over the one entered in OKB9. So, if we have an option to enter a cost object manually, then we always have a flexibility to enter whatever cost object that we require, which we feel as appropriate for that transaction. Because many a times, a single cost element might need different cost objects depending upon the transaction. For example, a same one which is used in electricity expenses might use an electricity department cost center. If the cost element is being used for purchasing of administrative expenses, then we might use an admin related cost center. So the cost center or the cost object might change even though the GL account is same. Depending on the nature of transaction, we might change it. So it is always good to have that flexibility to assign an appropriate cost object when we have an option. If we do not have an option, that is when we go to OKB9, and whatever cost object you assign in OKB9 against a GL account, that is permanent. So irrespective of what is the nature of the transaction, where are you using it, if that is the GL account, then whatever cost object you are mapping there, that will be the default cost object in all the transactions. So there are certain restrictions like this in OKB9. So we need to use OKB9 only if there is no option for us to enter the cost object manually. So let's get into the system and see what all different type of cost objects can we assign to this cost element in OKB9. So this is OKB9, and here if you see, we are having different options. One, we can assign a default cost center, or we can assign a default order, which can be an internal order or a production order, and this can be a default profit center, or we can also assign a default profitability segment. And if you see here, we are having other options like detail per profit center or detail per business area or valuation area. So let us do one thing. So first thing, what I'll do is, this is the transaction, and what was our error message? While I was doing the error message, it has given a message that this MATR 0013, which is a primary cost element, which is my consumption account or change in the inventory account for finished goods, is not having a cost object assigned. And we don't have an option to assign this manually here. So I will first try to assign a default cost object for this. So create a new entry. This is my company code. This is the GL account. And I'll say I am going to assign a default cost center for now and save it. Perfect, data is saved. Now let us go back and try to save this. The document is posted perfectly. Now let us display this document and we'll see how this cost object has been captured. So if you see here, the cost center is available only on this line item, which is MATR 0013, change in the inventory account. And where did this come from? It came from OKB9. From a document level or from a line item level, it is not possible to understand whether this cost object has come from a direct assignment or a default value from OKB9, or it has come via some substitution, etc. It is very difficult to understand from a line item level. All that we can see here is cost center is derived from somewhere or assigned to it, and document is posted. Now let us try to make some change here. So what we'll do is, instead of having a cost center, I will try to have a profit center here. This is one of my profit centers. And if you see here, yes, this is what we want to see. If you see here, it says profit center is only allowed for revenue elements. So let us go to FS00 and see this GL account. And if you see here, this is a primary cost or revenue, and the cost element category for this is 1, which means this is a cost object. This is a cost element, not a revenue element. So we cannot assign a profit center for this. So we will see the revenue case sometime later while we were seeing on a sales example. So order, I am not assigning an internal order at this point because internal orders and cost centers work very much the same way. So let us select this and try to go here. It says change the rule for detailed account assignment first. That means we can use, so it's what it says, you want to branch into the detailed account assignment for business area or a valuation area. First, what does this mean? It means that we can have a different cost object assignment per valuation area. What is a valuation area? Valuation area is our plant. So per plant, we can have a different cost object, but that setting is allowed only if it is a profit center. So that means only if we can or we are assigning a profit center as a default cost object, only then we can have this option of a detailed or a valuation area specific profit center. So before we go into the profit center, as I said, that is a different thing. We'll see it on the revenue side. So here, if you see, in addition to profit center, there is another checkbox which says valuation area is mandatory or business area is mandatory or profit center is mandatory. So for this cost element, in case of a revenue cost element, we can tell that in addition to this profit center, what else is mandatory? Do we also need to have a plant as a mandatory one? And why do we need that? We need that to have a separate cost element derived for a plant because every plant might have its own profit center which is to be assigned. So in that cases, we can replace or we can assign a separate profit center for valuation area. So in that cases, valuation area is also important to be there in that line item, right? So for that reason, we can have it here. As I said, we'll come to that later. And one more option is a profitability segment. Profitability segment is a COPA cost object. It contains a lot of details. Profitability segment is a combination of multiple characteristics, what we call as in COPA. So we create all these characteristics. Characteristics are assigned to our operating concern. Operating concern is assigned to our controlling area. So whatever controlling related objects or cost objects that are posted in that controlling area, those can use all these characteristics, and these characteristics together are called as profitability segment. So now if I enter this profitability segment and let us see if we can go here. No. If we can go here, no. So these are only for profit center. And now that I have enabled profitability segment, where can I enter the value of profitability segment? So that is an interesting thing. Profitability segment can never be entered manually. Profitability segment is always derived. When I say never, I mean in OKB9, if it is a manual transaction, we can always enter the values for different characteristics for the profitability segment. But in these cases where there is no option to enter manually and we are trying to derive it, system will automatically derive the values for those characteristics which are possible to derive in that transaction. For example, plant is one of my characteristics. And because this is a Migo transaction, I have entered the plant in the transaction. System will identify that plant and assign it to the profitability segment. But remember that there is no option to enter cost center. And because this is a primary cost element, cost center is mandatory. So even though you have profitability segment, we should ensure that the profitability segment is having cost center as one of its characteristics and the system is able to derive cost center as one of its characteristics. So we'll see that. So I'm going back to Migo. We'll do a goods receipt again. This is a 561 movement. Enter, and this is my material. One quantity. So plant and storage location are available to enter. I am entering it and let us save it and see what is it. So it says document is posted. Perfect. So let us now display this document and see what is the cost object that is assigned to it. So if we see here, there is no cost center, but if I go on to this line item, see the profitability segment is enabled. That means the system was able to derive all these characteristics depending on various values that are available in that transaction. Profit center has been derived from the material and division segment is derived from profit center. Company code is derived based on the linkage of plant to company code. Plant is entered in Migo manually and division is derived from the plant. Product is the material with what we have entered. So all these, whatever values that were possible to derive have been derived. So that is the advantage of having a profitability segment as an cost object. But we need to ensure that when do we require a profitability segment, when do we require a profit center, and when do we require a cost center. If cost center or profit center are mandatory, then it is better to enable or assign a default cost center and a profit center. But in case of a revenue transactions where profitability segment usually captures all the profit centers, then profitability segment is preferred. So profitability segment is preferred over profit center. Cost center is preferred usually for the purchase side. Profitability segment and profit centers usually are preferred for the revenue sides. Because even in MM and SD, material is something that is for sure present. In material master data, we have a profit center. So whenever we are using a material, we can be safe that profit center can be derived from the material. So on the sales side, if you have profit center, that is more than enough. We don't require a cost center. But on the purchase side, we require a cost center. Cost center cannot be derived from the material. It should be entered manually or assigned manually in OKB9. So it is better to use cost center on purchase side related GL accounts. And on the receivables, which is on the sales side, you can enter a profitability segment or a profit center. If you're having COPA enabled, better to go with profitability segment. If you don't, better to have a profit center. Or if you want to change the default profit center that is derived from the material, then also you can assign a different profit center in OKB9 for that GL account. Now let us do one thing. Let us go back to our GL account and see the field status group for this. This is the field status group. It says change in stock accounts. So let us see what all additional account assignments are available. So if you see here, cost center is optional. Ideally, we will use a different field status group G004. For example, if I assign it as G004, this is cost accounts, and for cost accounts, we have cost center as a mandatory one because we're having a cost object as one, the cost element category as one. But in this case, G030, there is no mandatory. So for that reason, the system allowed a profitability segment or the system allowed a cost center. Either of that is going to work. But if cost center or a profitability segment is marked as suppressed, then even though you assign it in OKB9, the system will still give an error message that cost object is not assigned to this GL account. So we need to ensure that the field status group is also allowing that particular cost object to be captured on that GL account. So this is on the OKB9 side for purchase. So we'll now see a sales side. For example, now I'm having a revenue cost object. So I'll go back to revenues and this is my sales revenue. And here if you see revenue GL account and let us see the additional account assignments. Profit center is optional, profitability segment is optional. Perfect. So these are the two important ones as I said on the receivables side. So for this GL account, I will go and I will assign a new one 0 mmh. This is my revenue account and let us say profitability segment, or I'll give it as directly, I'll give it as a profit center. Or before we even do that, I'll do one thing. I'll create quickly one sales order. So this is the delivery date. I'll give it as same day, payment terms, and this is the material, one quantity. Schedule lines, confirmed quantity. We have one, perfect. Let us see the account assignment. And here if you see, profit center is automatically derived from the material data. And because I have COPA enabled, I'm also having the profitability segment. So it does not make any sense for me to have a profitability segment or a profit center defaulting in OKB9 unless until I want to change the default derived profit center. So for now, we are not doing it. So I'll keep it like this and save this sales order. I'll do a delivery for this. Okay, now we will create a billing document for this. So let us display the accounting document. And here, this is the line item for the revenue. And if you see here, by default, profit center is derived from the material master data. And if you go back to general ledger view, we can also see the profitability segment. So this is the profitability segment value that is derived. Because COPA is enabled, the system had by default derived the profitability segment. But now what we'll do is we'll go to OKB9, and here I'm going to give as profitability segment mandatory. Let us see what change does it really make. So I'm going back. We will cancel this billing document. Okay, now let us create a new billing document. Save it and display the billing. So if we see here, again, we are having a profit center derived. And if you go to general ledger accounting, we have profitability segment. So it did not make any difference. Why? Because we have an option to derive the profitability segment or profit center manually or automatically by the system in that transaction itself. So there is no need to assign a OKB9 in these cases. It is just an unnecessary activity of data maintenance in OKB9. It's an unnecessary configuration activity. So it is better to not maintain it. And now let us see what happens if I still maintain it. I'll maintain it as EV as one of my profit centers, or let me see what profit centers I have. So I have EV, and now I'll save it. So before we go, I'll also see what all different options here. So if I now select this, go back. Yeah. And here let us select it as how do we want to populate the profit center? Do we want to assign it directly here? Okay, we'll see each by one by one, the case by case. So here I am assigning a default profit center as EV whenever this account is used. Now let us go back. I'll now cancel this billing document again. And now I'll go to VF01 and assign a billing document. Document is posted. Display, accounting. Here if you see, the profit center is still common, and if we double click this line, even the profitability segment is also available, and here also the profit center is common. So what we understand is OKB9 does not have any impact if the transaction is automatically able to derive the cost objects within that transaction, like how it happened here. Here it is deriving from the billing document, which is in turn deriving from the material, etc., which is given in the sales order. So in those cases, OKB9 does not have any impact. So when does OKB9 has a significance? So I'll do one thing. We'll go back to OKB9, and here I am removing this assignment. Save it, and now I will go to FB70, which is a manually entering transaction code for customer invoice. And here we will just take this revenue GL account, enter the amount. I'm not entering any profit center. I'm just entering a profitability segment. The advantage with profitability segment is you just open it, click continue, the system will take it as profitability segment entered and hit enter. And if you see here, it says assign this to a profit center. That means the system is not able to derive any profit center for this. So now we'll do one thing. I'll add another entry. And this time I am entering profit center common as my default cost object. So I'll reopen this FB70. Let us see how the OKB9 is having a significance here. And here also I'm not entering any profit center manually. I'm just directly entering the profitability segment, and see now directly the system had derived a segment should be from a profit center, and the profit center is common. And where is this coming from? This is coming from OKB9. So OKB9 has a significance when the system will not find a default or find a cost object by default in that transaction. Then the system will go to OKB9 and assign whatever is given in OKB9 here. Now, what if I manually enter another profit center here? Let us see if this overwrites OKB9 or not. So I have entered it as EV, and here open this, and now let us see. And if you see here, the system had overwritten common from OKB9 with EV, which is entered manually. So as we discussed, whatever is entered manually, that has a higher significance for the cost object derivation in the scenarios of OKB9. So I'll post this document, save it, and display this. And here if we see, we have entered EV, but OKB9 is having common. Because EV is manually entered, that has taken up the preference, and the profitability segment is also having EV as the profit center. So this is how OKB9 works. Now in addition to this, we are also having different options. Like if you want to derive a separate profit center depending upon the plant, then you can use this option. I have only one plant, so I'm not able to show it. But if you have a profit center as a mandate, like if you want to use a different profit centers, then you can directly use this. For example, you're having this option. Now hit enter. Now if I select this, you need not enter this. And if you select this and go to details per profit center, you can enter different cost centers, and based on those cost centers, the system will derive the profit center. Or if you're having an order, based on those, the system will derive the profit center. So there can be multiple cost centers. For example, I'm entering common, and for common, I'll say as EV. For common, the profit center assigned in the cost center master data is common, but just for the sake of it, I'm keeping it as EV. So like this, you can map different cost centers to profit centers or orders to profit centers. Or if I go back and give this option as 1, which is valuation, then here you need to go here and give against each and every valuation area. For example, my plant is 0 mmH. Against that plant, you can give what should be the cost center and profit center. So typically this is used in the sales order transactions where material is not having a profit center, but depending on the plant, the system can derive the profit center. If the material is having a profit center, that is always going to take a significance. But if you remove the profit center from the material master data and you are just entering the plant, then the system will take the profit center from here. You can try that. And if you're facing any questions or doubts, post it in the comments under this video and I will try to answer that. So this is about OKB9, and I hope you found this video useful. If you found it, please do like it, share it, and do not forget you can contribute by either joining the channel or by clicking the thanks button and help us create many such videos. So see you in the next one. Take care.